Today we are here to learn or talk something about Gita, Bhagavad Gita. And the subject itself is so sweet. If we listen the same thing many times, it again adds more sweetness to our knowledge. I myself started studying this Bhagavad Gita since 1985. But whatever I have learned in the last 1 year is about 80%, or we can say 85%. And rest of the 15% was the previous knowledge. So thanks to that long gap we received because of this world situation. That time we utilized for going deeper and deeper into this aspect and creating some literature and some classes. So let us come directly to our subject, Bhagavad Gita. So I tried to understand this Bhagavad Gita in 1985 at my own. At that time, I was not gone through Siddha Samadhi Yoga. So I tried at my own with one book of Vinoba Bhave. And I found that it was beyond my reach, or I could not sum up the thing. I wanted to sum up what is there in Bhagavad Gita. That was my simple question. Or why so many people are studying it, when this is so appreciated book, then I must know in one paragraph or in some one-liners, see, this is what is the teaching of Bhagavad Gita. In 5 lines, 10 lines, I should have been able to do that. But I could not do that at that time. I gave my 1 month dedicatedly. I went to some ashram, naturopathy ashram, and at my own I kept mount and I kept reading and taking notes, etc. Then I did my Siddha Samadhi Yoga program in 1993. And then onwards, I started relating various lessons of SSY with Bhagavad Gita. And that also has not dawned upon me in one night. After many readings, I was finding, oh, this looks like our, what we can say, acceptance of the moment, or this looks like a leader-follower lesson. So this looks like some AMC process. So this way, I kept on writing in my book. I had one dedicated copy for this reading, and I was reading every day 1 chapter. After my taking bath, religiously I was sitting and started taking notes in my book. So after 2, 3, 4 readings, I found that most of the Siddha Samadhi Yoga classes are covered there. And that journey stopped there only. I wrote some articles in Rishivani, and then a collection of that articles was published in a book format, a small booklet format, and that's all. I gave 2, 3 lectures also. But then I was very much keenly interested in developing Siddha Samadhi Yoga program through Bhagavad Gita. Because here in Maharashtra, in rural areas, people respect Bhagavad Gita, people respect Jnaneshwari. And to reach to their heart, I wanted to give this message of Siddha Samadhi Yoga, strong message of Siddha Samadhi Yoga to people or to rural people. But if we go to them to introduce them this name, which is totally different for them, this is just like an alien. What is this Siddha Samadhi Yoga and what you are going to teach us? So most of the energy goes into convincing them to join something. So I was thinking, suppose if I announce a class that I am going to teach you Bhagavad Gita, and then daily I can take a 1 class of Siddha Samadhi Yoga just relating to 1 shloka. Announcing that 1 shloka and giving SSY class only. This was my quest. And for that, from that point of view, I started studying Bhagavad Gita in last 1 year. And then I came to know that something very wonderful is coming out. So after that, I conducted about 7 online classes. So 4 were in Hindi and 2 in Marathi, 1 in English also. So today we will go through the introductory part only, because this understanding total Bhagavad Gita, first of all, Bhagavad Gita is very, very easy. This is my finding. And we can sum up in only 3 to 4 lines or 5 lines also. And at the end of session, I will give that summary, but still we all need to go through a 7 session or 8 sessions program. And that program is available online through videos also, and through online Zoom meetings also. That program is available, and personal guidance is also available. So I do not claim that I know everything, but whatever I have understood, I can pass on it to you. And if there is something with you, I can learn it from you also. So, and whatever is there with me has come only from Siddha Samadhi Yoga and nowhere else. Some small ideas came from one book from Gita Press, Swami Ram Sukdas. So he is one of the wonderful person who gave very detailed insights on Bhagavad Gita. And Gita Darpan, or there is one book from Swami Ram Sukdas, which all of you can refer at your Sadhak Sanjivani. The name of that book is Sadhak Sanjivani. So I have a Marathi copy. This one is a big volume, but it's a very wonderful and it gives insights. But how I studied, I would like to inform you. I never gone through any purport of any big names like Swami Ram Sukdas or Swami Vivekananda, or I avoided it. And I went through only a word-to-word translation or line-by-line translation. For example, there is a verse of 2 lines only. So I want a translation, exact translation in 2 lines only. No explanation. Because after reading that translation, because Sanskrit is difficult to understand, that is why translation is required. So after reading that 2-line translation, then I will contemplate on it at my own. And then I will relate it with my previous knowledge of SSY. And I will relate it with my daily experience. And then whatever is my understanding, I will write in that book. That was my system of studying Bhagavad Gita. And then after doing this much exercise also, when I was having some questions, then I went to this purport part of other like Swami Ram Sukdas and some other writers. So whatever I studied or whatever I wrote was from this a small booklet. So here in this booklet, you will find it is just a line-by-line translation. One shloka is in dark line, and then its translation under that. So why I am giving this information in detail? Because people get scared by looking towards such a big volume in front of this small Gita. So this big volume, there is nothing to get scared, because whatever is written in this big volume is that person's line of thinking. And we don't need this whole volume. Wherever, in which verse we want some detailed information, for that version only, for that part only, we shall refer. So even from this big volume also, I have not read more than 10 to 20 pages. wherever I was having some doubt, I got it clarified from here. And this is a very wonderful book. So now let us come to our subject. See, first of all, many of us are very much conversant with Bhagavad Gita. But let us start from a point of view that most of our meditators here sitting, they do not know anything about Bhagavad Gita. From this point or from zero, let us start. So first of all, what is Bhagavad Gita? From where it came? Or we know Bhagavad Gita is a great book. Or second, Bhagavad Gita is our religious book. Then Krishna told it to Arjuna, and that it is somewhere there in Mahabharata. This also very small number of people know that it comes from Mahabharata. But more than that, we do not know, or most of us are unaware. So we want to know that what is Indian philosophical scriptures, and in all those scriptures where Bhagavad Gita exactly stands. For example, we hear about Ramayana, we hear about Mahabharata, we hear about Upanishads. Then we hear about Bhagavatam, we hear about Bhagavad Gita. But what is the relation between all those books with each other? And what is the main source? How it came, how it developed, and how it started developing? This is what is a main important question. And then if we come to know the answer of all these questions, then and then only we will understand the importance of Bhagavad Gita. And once we understand the importance of Bhagavad Gita, then only we can understand the importance of Siddha Samadhi Yoga. Otherwise, we ourselves, we meditators, we teachers underestimate Siddha Samadhi Yoga. We say, oh, Siddha Samadhi Yoga, it's a wonderful program. Oh, what a wonderful brainstorming is there. There is something life-changing. And that's it, that it ends there. But we do not see towards Siddha Samadhi Yoga as one of the best, world's topmost philosophical training program, or the best training program in last 5,000 years. This we don't know. And my quest is that people should know this. Because if we know that, then and then only we will give the importance to those teachings in our life. And that will benefit our own life. Not for the sake of uplifting the image of our Guruji. This is not for that sake, but this is for the sake of our own benefit, that whatever we have received. See, for example, I have a bunch of some stones, and some are glass particles, glass stones, some are stones from some river, and some are diamonds. But if I don't know which one is diamond and which one is a glass and which one is a river stone, then it's of no use. That whole bunch is of no use. But once I come to know that this one is a diamond and this one is a precious one and this one is a second quality one, then and then only I can use that property or that material wisely. So to understand that, let us go through one PowerPoint presentation. We will be going through presentation because it gives double effect. Visual effect plus audio effect. When I talk, only single effect you get, that is audio effect. And visually you are seeing towards me, it's of no use. So I will share one, we will be going through today 2 PowerPoint sharings. And those who are repeating this class, they might be having some repetition, but please bear it with me. I have made some changes and updated some sharings. Is my PowerPoint on your screen? Okay. So, see here, it is written that where Gita is located exactly in ancient Indian literature. See, this whole presentation I prepared, but it took me more than 1 year. Every 8, 10, 15 days, I was getting some more information and I was incorporating in this small presentation. So Indian philosophical literature. So what is the base of Indian philosophical literature? So Indian philosophical literature is classified in two parts, only in two parts. One is Shruti and second is Smruti. So the word itself sounds, Shruti means Shravan or listening. So the knowledge which was listened. Listened by whom? Listened by Rishis. So okay, they listened it, but who told it to them? So Lord Brahma told it to them. So was it a vocal conversation? No, it was not a vocal conversation. In deep samadhi state, our rishis got this knowledge. And they gave all the credit to Lord Brahma, that Lord Brahma sent this knowledge to us. So it is not our creation. So rishis denied to take any credit for creation of this knowledge, and that is why it is named as Shruti. So what is there in Shruti? So in Shruti, there is Veda Grantha or Veda. So how many Vedas are there? So initially there was only one Veda. But that one Veda was so big and so huge, it was very difficult to study. And that is why Vyasa Rishi, he made it in 3 to 4 parts. Why I am saving it 3 to 4 parts? Because 3 Vedas are authentic Vedas and 4th one is not the authentic one, but it is said that some other rishis have created that Veda. So let us go towards that. So Shruti means that which is heard. And now what is Smruti? Smruti means which is remembered or which is thought of, which came out of intellectual contemplation. That is called Smruti, which came out of thinking. And Shruti came without thinking. This is what is a difference. Shruti is dawned upon them, but Smruti, they formatted it. So these are the two parts. Now these two flows will flow, or these two rivers will flow totally parallelly to each other. So now let us see something about Shruti, which is heard. So Rishi attained this jnana, that is ultimate true knowledge, in the state of samadhi. It is there in 4 Vedas, and this is called Shruti. So first one is Rig Veda. So these Vedas, it was initially single one, but Vyasa Maharshi, he distributed it in 3 parts, and that is why his name itself was transformed from Vyasa to Veda Vyasa. He is called as a Veda Vyasa. So first one is Rig Veda. So Rig Veda is a core Veda. And what Rig Veda consists, there are hymns for praying to Vedic gods. In Vedic period, they were having gods like wind was a god, sun was a god, Indra was a god. Those were Vedic gods. This Pancha Mahabhuta, every Mahabhuta is a god. Prithvi, Aap, Tej, Vayu, Akash. And to pray that god, Rig Veda is having those hymns or verses, mantras. Then Sama Veda is a second Veda. So what is there in Sama Veda? So how to sing Rig Veda is described in Sama Veda. So Sama Veda is nothing but a science of music. So all our Indian music, which is the most rich in all over world, so that music came from Sama Veda. So Sama Veda teaches us how to sing those Vedic verses. There is a very great science. Then third one is Yajurveda. So what is Yajurveda? Information about sacrifices during Vedic rituals. So while performing Vedic rituals, how to do those sacrifices? So sacrifices are made into that holy fire. So how to do those sacrifices and what to offer, when to offer, how many times to offer, and which mantra to be chanted. So all those procedures and details are there in Yajurveda. And fourth one is Atharva Veda. So Atharva Veda teaches rituals addressing practical issues of daily life. And of course, practical issues of daily life need not come from God himself. And that is why this Atharva Veda is constituted or written by Bhrigu Rishi or Angiras Rishi, or both of them. So Rigveda, Samaveda and Yajurveda are the three most important Vedas. So what we have seen up till now, we have seen Shruti and Smruti are the two basic parts. In Shruti, 4 Vedas are there: Rigveda, Samveda, Yajurveda and Atharvaveda. Now we will be going towards Gita, how Gita relates to everything that we are learning here. Now, in each Veda, there are 4 sections. For example, in Rig Veda, there are 4 sections. In Samaveda 4, Yajurveda 4, and Atharvaveda 4. So which are those 4 sections? The first section is called Sanhita. So Sanhita means mantra part. That is a core part of Veda. So all mantras are there in Sanhita. Then second part is called as Brahmanas. So Brahmanas means interpretation of those mantras. So what those mantras mean and the elaboration, that is written in second part. And third part is called as Aranyaka. So Aranyaka is the end part of Brahmanas, or we can call it sub part of Brahmanas, and that is called as Aranyaka, but that is a different one. And then Upanishads. So Upanishads is the end part of Aranya. So Sanhita, then Brahmanas, then Aranyakas, and then Upanishad. You can call it as a 4 chapters of every yoga, every Veda. So here you just concentrate on Upanishads. So from where Upanishads came from? Because we know, see, we talk now, we are going to listen Kathopanishad, or we are going to listen Taittiriya Upanishad, Aishwarya, and there are 11 more important Upanishads. So those Upanishads are related with Vedas in this 4th part. So this is one of the points that you have to remember on this slide. Now let us come to Upanishads, because Upanishads are important from our point of view. All those first 3 parts, Sanhita, Brahmanas and Aranyakas, they are not related with our day-to-day life or the philosophy that we want to learn to face our day-to-day life. But that philosophy is still there in Upanishads. And that is why we are now devoted this next slide to Upanishads. So in Rig Veda, there is one Upanishad only. In last part of Rig Veda, there is one Upanishad, and that is called Aitareya Upanishad. Then in Samaveda, there are 2 Upanishads, Chandogya Upanishad and Kena Upanishad. Then in Yajurveda, there are 5 Upanishads, Kathopanishad, Taittiriya Upanishad, Ishopanishad, Svetashvetopanishad, and Bruhadaranyaka Upanishad. And then with Atharva Veda, Mandukya, Mundak, and Prashnopanishad. Mandukya Upanishad, Mundaka Upanishad, and Prashnopanishad. So these are total 13 Upanishads, which are related with these 4 Vedas. And these are the most important Upanishads. But if you go and search on internet, you will find many more names also, because many more Upanishads were added by later rishis. And some may say there are 108 Upanishads, or some may count more also. But these are the most important 13 Upanishads. So now what is Vedanta? Because we have heard this word many times, Vedanta. And this word is made very much popular by Swami Vivekananda. Because we hear that Swamiji went to European countries and US, and there he started teaching Vedanta to people. But what is Vedanta? That we don't know. What is the exact meaning of Vedanta? So before that, learning about Vedanta, let us see what is investigation. So investigation is called as Mimamsa in Sanskrit. So there is a science of Mimamsa. So though all those Vedas came from Lord Brahma or God itself, still our rishis want to do Mimamsa of it. They want to investigate. They want to relate it with their day-to-day life. And if it is true, if it satisfies their intellect, then and then only they are going to accept. Not only because Baba Vakyam Pramana, because Lord has given it, that is true. Not like that. Rishis will investigate at their own. So there is a science of investigation, and that science itself is bifurcated in two parts. One part is Purva Mimamsa. Purva Mimamsa means contemplation on the meaning of certain Vedic texts. This is called Purva Mimamsa. And second part, Uttar Mimamsa. Uttar Mimamsa means focus on the latter portions of the Vedas, that is Upanishads. Okay. So investigation of those four Vedas, that is segregated in two parts, Purva Mimamsa and Uttar Mimamsa. Now, for the time being, we are not looking towards Purva Mimamsa because it is a contemplation on Vedic mantras, but we will concentrate on Uttar Mimamsa because that is a investigation of Upanishads itself. And that Uttar Mimamsa is called as Vedanta. So what Swamiji taught to Western world is this part. This Vedanta means this Upanishadic knowledge he taught through his various lectures. So this is what is the meaning of word Vedanta. Now, we have completed the stream, first stream, that is Shruti part. Shruti part consists 4 Vedas, and every Veda consists 4 chapters, and the 4th chapter of every Veda is Upanishad, and there are 13 most important Upanishads in Shruti. So that is what is a outcome of our first part. Now let us see what is Smruti. So Smruti, which comes out from intellect, that is Smruti, or which is remembered. So it is produced out of human intellect. Everything else other than Shruti comes under Smruti. So everything else other than those 4 Vedas comes under Smruti. So this is a one-line definition we can give for Smruti. So what is there in Shruti? So in Smruti scriptures, there are 6 Vedangas. So what is Vedanga? Vedanga means the auxiliary science in Vedas. It's a supplementary science. Then Mahabharata and Ramayana, these are the epics, or that is a history of India, Mahabharata and Ramayana. Then Srimad Bhagavad Gita. So Srimad Bhagavad Gita, though it is a part of Mahabharata, all those 18 adhyaya is a small part, very small part of Mahabharata. But still, it is given a separate position as a separate book or separate grantha in these Smriti scriptures. Then Brahma Sutras. So this is also a philosophical verses which are collected under the name of Brahma Sutras. Then Dharma Sutra, Dharma Shastra, Artha Shastra, and 18 Mahapuranas. So what is Puranas? Puranas are the books, and these are 18 Mahapuranas. So it is in the format of light stories, because all this Vedic literature that can be understood only by intellectuals. But what about all other people, those who are not intellectuals? For example, our small farmer or small worker or some class 4 workers in government offices, or even the porters on railway station. So all those, the root level people of this human mankind, they also are having right to access this knowledge. And that is why our rishis simplified all this knowledge in very wonderful stories. And that story format is 18 Mahapuranas. And one of that Mahapurana is Bhagavad Mahapuran. So that Bhagavad Mahapurana is a crown of these 18 Mahapurans. So though we cannot go through 18 Mahapurans, we must read Bhagavad Mahapuran. So now these are the all Smriti scriptures. But out of all those, I have colored only two, Srimad Bhagavad Gita and Brahma Sutras. And in previous slide also, I have colored only one part, and that is Upanishads. So Upanishads, Srimad Bhagavad Gita, and Brahma Sutras. These three literatures are having very special position in our whole philosophy. So now let us see whatever we have learned in a very tabular format. So Indian philosophy, that is bifurcated in two parts, Shruti and Smriti. So under Shruti, there are 4 Vedas, Rigved, Samved, Yajurved, and Atharvaved. So every Ved is bifurcated in 4 parts, Sanhita, Brahmanas, Aranyakas, and Upanishads. So I have colored it red, dark. So 13 Upanishads are there, and that is called as Uttarmimamsa or Vedanta. And now Smriti, 6 Vedangas, Mahabharata, Ramayana, Gita, Brahma Sutra, Dharma Sutra, Dharma Shastra, Artha Shastra, 18 Mahapuranas, and all other literature that comes under Smriti. So these are the 2 separate flows. Out of that, Upanishads, Gita, and Brahma Sutras, they are having a very special position, and they are called as Prasthana Trayi. Trayi means 3. So these are 3. And Prasthan means starting. So whosoever wants to start his journey in this Indian philosophical literature, he has to go through these 3 important books or 3 important sections of our philosophy: Upanishads, Gita, and Brahma Sutra. So these 3 portions are even separately named. In Prasthantrayi, Upanishads, they are from Shruti, they are named as Upadesha Prasthan. So there is a Upadesha, that it is a God's word. It comes from Shruti. It is not drafted by any human mankind. So that is why it is a Upadesha Prasthan. Then second, Brahma Sutras, that is called as a Sutra Prasthan. So Sutra means what? A very compact. So Sutra Prasthan means a very compact form of knowledge in compact verses. So these are all logical texts. And third one is Bhagavad Gita, and that is called as Sadhana Prasthan. So in this whole Indian philosophical literature, we found in those two streams, these three parts are most important, and it is called as Prasthantrayi. And within these three parts, Bhagavad Gita is most important because that is a sadhana prasthan. That gives us a sadhana. Sadhana means how to implement. See, philosophy is great philosophy, but if it is there in unimplementable form, it's of no use. And that is why these whole Upanishads and Brahma Sutras all are converted into implementable form. And that implementable form is Bhagavad Gita. And that Bhagavad Gita is given by Lord himself when he or Lord was in human form of Lord Krishna, and he told it to Arjuna. So that is what is a practical text, and that is why Bhagavad Gita is a most important book or most important text for all the humankind. Not only we Indians or not only we Hindus, but for everyone. So now I hope you have understood the importance of Bhagavad Gita. Now, why there are so many commentaries on Gita? Actually, asking this question itself is my foolishness, because after giving so much, after telling you so much importance of Bhagavad Gita, it is very much natural that in every generation, people wrote commentaries. So there are thousands and thousands of people who wrote on comment on Bhagavad Gita. But that is not important. See, in every generation or in every 100 years, there is one person who is extraordinarily intelligent. See, for example, in India, we have about 500 or 600 districts in whole India. And every district is having one district magistrate, DMO, or we call it collector. So in whole India, there are only about 600 persons who are managing all those 600 districts. So those 600 persons must be extraordinary. So those are all IAS people. They pass through Indian Administrative Services and they are selected from there, and then they are allotted those special positions. So 600 people in every 30 years come up from India. For example, every collector serves for 30 years, let us assume. So 600 persons in every 30 years. So in every 100 years, about 1800 or 2000. So here, out of those 2000, someone most intellectual, not that IAS cadre, but from this whole population, someone comes up and he writes something, he explains something, and that comes up as a commentary. So there are about 50 commentaries. So they wrote that commentary because this is an important life science. It inspired intellectuals of every generation. There are more than 50 commentaries. Some of most well-known commentaries are of Adi Shankaracharya, Sridharacharya, Madhavacharya, Raghavendracharya, Vallabhacharya, Ramanujacharya. They are the most renowned people. Then Santa Gnaneshwar, he wrote Gnaneshwari, and Gnaneshwari is nothing but a Tika Granth of Bhagavad Gita. Then Lokmanya Tilak, Mahatma Gandhi from recent generations, they also wrote commentaries on Bhagavad Gita. Then Vinoba Bhave, Aurobindo, there are commentaries from them also. So these are some selected names. But if you want to see a list of those 50 commentaries, it is here in front of you. those all 50 people are from last 5,000 years. They are chosen here. And there are ancient and modern and even foreigners also. So everyone wrote from his point of view the meaning of Bhagavad Gita. So why such important intellectuals are working on Bhagavad Gita? And if they are working on it, then there must be something which we must understand, or we must put it in our life to uplift our life. Because this life is a one-time game. See, unless we remember past life and we are going to know about next life, there is no meaning about thinking that I will do something in next life. So whatever needs to be done, we have to do in this life only. So that is why we are looking towards what is most precious for us to study. Now, all those 50 people, they wrote their commentaries on Bhagavad Gita, but they have not written it on Yoga Sutras. See, we all are yoga students. So now we have to look towards Patanjali Yoga Sutra also and Bhagavad Gita also. Now, whenever we talk about study of yoga, people immediately refer to Patanjali. Even our Swami Ramadev also, he formed a Yoga Vidyapith and he named it after Patanjali, Patanjali Yoga Pith. So, I'm not going to compare. See, Patanjali Muni is having his own importance. But we, the common people, like Arjuna, which book we need to refer? Because here itself we make a wrong choice, then our whole journey itself will become very hard. Because to understand Yoga Sutras is also one of the difficult tasks. So Gita describes practical philosophy for common man, which Lord Krishna gave it to his very beloved Arjuna on the war field. And we, common people, are day to day in some war. For us, our life itself is a war. Now, how to fight this war? So that philosophy is useful for us. Yoga Sutras are beyond experiential reality for common man. They may be useful, but that group of people is totally different. High intellectuals or maybe something else. Philosophers of every generation preferred Gita over Yoga Sutras. So I don't say don't refer Yoga Sutras, but comparatively, let us look towards Gita because Lord Krishna is called as Yogeshwar. See, why I am explaining it in so much details? Because to remove our wrong understandings, we look towards Gita just like as some dharma grantha or some religious book. And I want to convert your mind, or I want to change your sight from a dharma grantha to from a religious book to a yoga book. Bhagavad Gita is a yoga book. It's not a religious book. It gives us religious insight, spiritual insight, but still it is a more yoga book. So what we understood, first of all, where is Gita placed in Indian philosophy? This is what is the takeaway from this slideshow. Then what is Prasthanatrayi? What are these three most important parts of our philosophy? And then why so many commentaries are there on Gita? And out of that, importance of Gita in this total scheme. This is what we understood. And now, once again, we will recap this tree or tree chart so that we can finalize our this slideshow. So I think you have captured it or photographed on your screen, mind screen. And now let us end it here.